Sustainability Advisory Board meeting for 13 December. We have a quorum. First item on our agenda is to review our housekeeping items. Kathy, please.
Good evening. This is Kathy Richardson, the Sustainability Director. A few housekeeping items for tonight's Zoom meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function of this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. And all board members, if you can please keep your video on, and all others can keep your video off unless you are participating during the meeting. If you're having any trouble, you can send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And now I'll turn the meeting back to Stan.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Can everybody hear Kathy okay? It looks like I'm getting head nods. Okay. Next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the November meeting. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review those. I appreciate you putting in there, Kathy, what we did not cover. I thought that was good to have in there as well. So I don't know if anybody has any suggested edits or comments on the minutes. Kay?
The only thing that I did not see was any attachments that were discussed from the meeting itself. So, you know, I had proposed a new subcommittee, and that those attachments were not attached to the minutes. They were in the meeting discussion, but not attached.
Usually the documents are attached to the agenda, so staff doesn't attach them a second time to the minutes. So the documents discussed were part of the agenda.
Perhaps then you should make note that they were in the meeting, because there was just a discussion about the topic, but not that there was a written, you know, somehow maybe just say, see the agenda for the previous.
You want to propose an amendment?
Yeah. I also didn't know, was there a discussion in there on that item that was going to be checked about was the annual meeting, or not annual meeting, the report for that ordinance?
I saw that here.
I didn't know if that was the outcome or...
No, it's under staff report. It says there was not time left, but SAB discussed the annual report, and staff reported that they were working on the report.
Okay. So no letter got sent or anything, which was originally requested as the, you know, toward the end of the meeting, we discussed having a letter sent to the city manager.
I don't particularly, do you recall that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do actually recall that.
And then that's not in that. That doesn't reflect that either.
Propose an amendment.
Okay. So I propose that we add to the minutes that under the section regarding the new Sustainability Subcommittee for the city ordinance, that it be documented that the information about the subcommittee was provided in the agenda for that meeting. Unless we're going to attach it, which I guess we're not, but.
So a sentence that refers to, you know, for specific language about the proposed subcommittee, see the agenda from November 8.
Right, that would be the first one. And then then there was an item, and I don't know exactly where you would put it, because I think it was after the staff report that we had that discussion, that there should be added a note that there was a letter proposed to be sent to the city manager regarding that annual report. And you can word that however you want.
I'm not amending it.
Okay, well then I just suggest that it be added as an item.
Under staff report?
I guess it was really under our discussion, so it would be number 7 and added. Or put it under the discussion for the new SAB subcommittee. Doesn't matter to me where it fits, but we did discuss having a letter sent to the city manager regarding that.
So a new item number 7, what maybe you're suggesting is a new item number 7 added that indicates there was discussion about sending a letter to the city manager concerning the annual report required under ordinance 9744.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Can you add that, Kathy? You think you captured that?
Yep.
Okay. Well, now I don't have my Zoom pictures up. Are there any other suggested edits to the minutes? Not seeing any. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion to include Kay's suggested edits?
She's moving.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I meant,
I'm asking for a motion to approve the minutes with Kay's
right, and I make
suggested
the
edits.
motion, yes.
Kay, I guess Kay technically
Yes,
made that
made the
motion.
motion.
And who was it? Was it Nancy who
Nancy.
seconded?
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes with Kay's suggested edits, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Kay. Thanks, Kathy. Now I got to get back up to the agenda. Next item on our agenda is to receive the sustainability staff report.
Okay.
That would be Kathy.
Yeah, I'll be as brief as I can. First item that I wanted to mention is the climate pollution reduction grant. So there was an email that was shared from Kay on a workshop that was online that KDHE was hosting. Just kind of a recap, a few months ago during a staff report, I had mentioned some information on grants that had been released, and the climate pollution reduction grant was one that we were following. That's the grant that has 2 phases. One phase is the planning phase of funding, and the second phase is the implementation. On the planning side of things, the way that the money was being distributed is $1 million to the largest metropolitan areas. So the top 75 largest metropolitan areas, if they submitted their notice that they wanted to participate in this, they got their $1 million for planning. And then on the state side, each state was allocated $3 million. I think the majority of the states, but not all, did submit to receive that funding. The state of Kansas is one of those states that did receive the $3 million. And this is, again, for the planning phase. You can't apply and be selected for an implementation grant if you're not part of a state or a metropolitan area that completed their climate action planning. So that's that planning phase first. And your project really has to be within that plan. So if you apply for something that's outside of what the plan put together by the state or the metropolitan area, then doesn't really qualify. Really where the money is in the implementation grants. And so what the state of Kansas has been doing is gathering feedback from a lot of stakeholders, and they've been hosting these workshops throughout the state to gather feedback on what should be included in their plan. They are calling it ERAMP instead of Climate Action Plan, but ERAMP is the equivalent of a Climate Action Plan for the state of Kansas. And the reason they're gathering all this input on projects that maybe are ready for for implementation grants throughout the state so that these can be listed and included within the plan that the state is needing to submit next year. So City of Lawrence and Douglas County did participate in one of the workshops that was hosted here in Lawrence at the fairgrounds. And there was a lot of folks there in participation, lots of ideas. I mean, maybe over 60 different topics or ideas came out of that discussion. And the state of Kansas is more formally accepting those projects or detailed information about the projects we're interested in via a form they have issued. So for the City of Lawrence, we are going to jointly submit our projects with the county. And the way that we have kind of gone through what our priority projects are that we would like included in ERAMP is by looking at our draft climate action and adaptation plan that we have right now, and seeing, you know, what implementation of one of the strategies or actions that we can take to really move the needle and move our climate action and adaptation plan forward and reduce emissions. So we are submitting probably at the end of this week 6 projects. They include weatherization, solar in respect to rooftop, or solar also for our municipal facilities. You all know that we have a wastewater treatment plant that's solar ready, EV charging infrastructure, regional alternative transportation like Topeka, Lawrence, Kansas City, and so forth. The other thing I did want to share, in addition to City of Lawrence and Douglas County, submitting these projects to the state to be included, is that we did find out that we can participate within the large metropolitan area, which is kind of being led right now by the MARC staff in coordination for planning efforts. So Douglas County and City of Lawrence, as you know, we were part of the Kansas City Regional Climate Action Plan. And due to that, and also the fact that the EPA really does encourage the large metropolitan areas to reach out to those communities that are kind of bordering their area to include within their, not only their plan, but then also the possibilities of projects that could be funded through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So with that said, we've been participating, and you've probably seen Mark has been very active in also gathering input from a lot of stakeholders in their area. They've invited the City of Lawrence and Douglas County to participate as well. And they will be, it's a little bit different than the state of Kansas, because Mark is actually interested in being the applicant for the implementation grant, and then they would distribute funds on a competitive kind of application basis. So again, Mark is not saying, let's just think of all these projects and everybody then applies directly to the EPA. They're interested in being the applicant. The state of Kansas at this time throughout the workshops said that they are not interested in being the applicant for the implementation grant. So really what the state of Kansas is saying to us is all of us can individually go for the funding. And by the way, it's about $4.3 billion in the implementation grant that's available. But it is going to be extremely competitive. And as you know, some areas are very organized. The state of Kansas did say that if multiple cities or counties submit projects that are similar, they will let us know so that we can work together. So maybe there's 5 counties or 5 cities in the state of Kansas that have a similar project. Or there might be a statewide organization that steps up and wants to be the applicant of the implementation grant, and then they could distribute the funds, whether it's in a competitive type of process or something like that. So just to say to you to understand that there's kind of 2 ways that we're participating in the possibility of the climate pollution reduction grant. And we are doing it jointly with Douglas County because we do share our Douglas County Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Any questions on that?
I have one or two. So, sorry, and thank you for your Herculean effort to come when you're sick and talk the whole time.
No problem.
So for the planning phase, are we part through Mark of the $1 million for the top 75 metro? Or are we part of the potential $3 million that's distributed over the state, or both?
We found out that we're really both.
Okay.
So technically, we're part of the $3 million of the state of Kansas. We're in that area. We're not part of the Mid-America Regional Council or that metropolitan area as it's outlined. But the EPA is encouraging these large metropolitan areas to reach out through their borders and pick up those communities that are right around them. So we would qualify under that. In addition to the fact that our large metropolitan area in the Kansas City area had already worked on a climate action plan process that included Douglas County and the city of Lawrence. So we kind of have two positive reinforcement of why we also can lend ourselves to be part of that metropolitan area, as well as we're still submitting our information to the state of Kansas. And we would also qualify if maybe a statewide organization applies for some funds that the city of Lawrence or Douglas County could apply for. But just being an applicant like City of Lawrence sending in straight to EPA, they're saying that's really not going to be competitive at all. Because these are really, again, 75 of the largest metropolitan areas are likely to submit for implementation grants since they've been working hard on their planning phase. And there's going to be less than 75 awardees, I believe, or at least in the higher level.
So have the funds
funding.
for the planning already been distributed then? It sounds like those weren't competitive funds. For example, did the city of Lawrence and Douglas County already receive funds from the climate pollution reduction grant for planning from both the Mark side and potentially from the state side?
Yeah, that's a good question for clarification. So for the planning phase, that isn't necessarily money that's just being distributed within that large metropolitan area or within the state. It's for the state agency and for the metropolitan area to come up a plan to get all that stakeholder feedback and be able to host things to come up with their plan for that metropolitan area. But with that said, during the workshop that KDHE hosted, they did tell us that of the $3 million, they are planning, although I haven't seen the details, but they are planning to award $50,000 to $100,000 to at least 6 sub-awardees for communities that currently do not have, in Kansas, that currently do not have a climate action plan, which I don't know that any community in Kansas has a climate action plan, except for the ones that are part of the Kansas City Regional Climate Action Plan, and then the draft that is here in Douglas County. But they did not provide the details of how those sub-awardees, or how you can become a sub-awardee. But the idea was they were going to distribute some funds for specific action planning in some cities and counties in Kansas.
Okay. Thank you very much for
Up to 6.
clarification. Thanks.
Any other questions? I thought I saw a hand raised. Maybe it was Dawn, but she had to go.
I don't see any questions. I'll just say that I'm kind of surprised to hear that Kansas is not, as a state, is not applying for CPRG.
Yeah.
I am aware of other states who are talking to military installations about teaming together on things like that, where the installation could be a user of hydrogen, for example. If you have a hydrogen project in a state that would offset GHG emissions, for energy generation, things like that. So that's, but I'm glad to hear that we can apply with Mark. I think that'll be
Yeah.
beneficial.
I think that's definitely helpful for us because we have both possibilities. The next item I wanted to briefly talk about is the single-use plastic bag ordinance and the campaign work that's happening around that. So the City of Lawrence, we did issue an RFP that went out over a month ago, and we selected a vendor. It's a communications consultant that is going to help with this project, the campaign. We currently are waiting on both parties to sign the agreement, so I'm not going to say who the vendor is, but work has been underway for the last 2 months as we've been gathering content for a new web page that will be, or website that will be launched this month, and then other educational materials will come out in January. But kind of be on the lookout. I have sent a question to Nancy and Kay, and I might engage the subcommittee that had been working on the single-use plastic bag ordinance for some of these communication pieces, but I'll have a better update in January where we can actually show you some of what's being developed and what the plans are with this communications consultant. But number one is communicating to our business partners. That communication will go out here pretty quickly, in addition to what's already been released of what's of the action that the City Commission took. But there's going to be a lot more here coming soon. Also wanted to mention that we are working on, I know there's been some questions about Evergy's IRP update for 2024 and how the city may participate in that process. We are having staff meetings. I've been meeting with the city attorney's office of what we can do and the resources that we would need. So at this time, there's not much more I can say, but please note that we are working on this for sure. Then on the update, because this is already work that's happening, is we are already planning Earth Day 2024. So South Park has been reserved for Saturday, April 20th. Earth Day's on 22nd, that's a Monday. We're going to have the event the Saturday before. And all the partners within the unmistakable identity outcome of the strategic plan are kind of once again participating in this with the Watkins Museum of History kind of leading coordination. Earlier this year, the Sustainability Advisory Board did comment for this year's event that it was too short. It was a 2-hour event, so we are extending the hours slightly to 3 hours next year, with the understanding that there are other partners like Prairie Park Nature Center and others. KU has a lot of activities around Earth Day, so we don't want to take up a whole day's event when we know that people want to visit different Earth Day activities throughout the day. We have been in communication with Friends of the Cause as well, because they do a big river cleanup for Earth Day, and they still have not decided if they're going to host it on that 20th or they're just going to delay for the next weekend, so the Saturday after Earth Day. That might help with all the activities that all happen at once. And then on the annual report for Ordinance 9744, I know that was just mentioned. It is not yet ready for release, but we're working on it. And those are my updates. If anybody had any questions on single-use plastic bags or Earth Day for the report.
It looks like Nancy has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about the IRP for Evergy, and could you say a little bit more about that? We had talked about possibly having a resolution from this committee requesting the city manager or someone else be intervener there.
Yeah. So there were some conversations, and I know the SAB subcommittee had been talking about the possibility of putting through a resolution that would go to the city commission to state, that the city would state its clean renewable energy goals and then participate in the Evergy IRP process. And then the commission would direct staff to kind of work on that. What I'm telling you is that we're already working on that. So I don't know that a resolution necessarily is the way to go. I mean, that's up to this board. But I know it was something that I had conversations with the city manager and city manager's office. And I've been involved with our city attorney's office as well as to how we may participate in the Evergy IRP plan update for 2023. I will also mention that this, it's not, we've participated as an intervener in the past. So this is not something that's new to us. It does take a lot of resources for those of you who know on the legal counsel side. And so again, we have to do a smart approach of how we could be successful in undertaking something like this. And if we have the adequate funding and resources that we would need for it. I think the first time around when we participated as an intervener, we learned a lot from that experience. And those are the things that we're currently talking about and seeing how we could kind of move forward on.
Thanks for the clarification.
For those here in attendance and for those out in Zoom land that might not know, so an IRP is an integrated resource plan. And that's how Evergy decides for the future what kind of resources they need, what their mix of energy is going to come from, what are policies that would affect those kinds of things. So they're making decisions about those kinds of plans now. And the question is about whether or not the city or the county, as purchasers of that energy and as representing the constituents that purchase it, would want to say something about where they want their energy to come from, for example. Right? Is that fairly accurate, Kathy?
Yeah.
And the IRP is reviewed and approved by the Kansas Corporation Commission.
Yes.
And that's where the city could potentially be an intervener. There are other entities, other stakeholders that may also want to intervene. But that's where all that is done, is at the Kansas Corporation Commission.
Yes. And one thing I will mention is the date for Evergy to file their IRP for 2024 is April 1st of 2024. And it is my understanding from conversations with the KCC is that they're opening a new docket for that. So it won't be the docket that was opened earlier this year for the conversation on the rates. But April 1st, 2024 is when they file. And then anyone who was an intervener previously, it was what was mentioned to me, will need to petition to be an intervener for the new docket.
And perhaps this is a stupid question, but being an intervener, you've done it before, you learned a lot. I'm not entirely sure what that process what that means to be an intervener. Like, does that mean that you just lobby on behalf of what the city's wishes are, right? So that's that's just a legal term for basically advocating for the city's interest. Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's okay, there's a lot of...
It's a formal legal process to become an intervener.
Okay.
I did want to mention too that there's different ways and different approaches that communities or organizations will have this conversation. So there is, number one, the option that you just, as the City of Lawrence or an organization, can set up a meeting with Evergy directly with their staff and sit down at their place or our place and have a conversation about their IRP and then like what our goals are and so forth. So we can have that kind of conversation. It's not a public conversation. The second thing that we could do is we can participate in public meetings. So usually they will host public meetings and everybody's invited to come and you can provide your public comment. And then with the KCC, the Kansas Corporation Commission, there are two options, like the kind of informal, again, kind of public speaker. It's not a real formal intervener, or you can petition to be at the table and go through that legal, more formal process. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go about having the conversation with different kind of strengths of voice with each one.
Thanks. Thanks for the clarification.
I don't see any additional questions. for
I just had a
Kathy.
couple, I mean, this isn't really questions, Kathy, but like on the, you guys talking about the 6 projects for the CPRG and also for the education stuff on the plastic bags. I mean, just in light of what City Commission has talked about in the reimagining of SAB, if there's ways that we can contribute to those, we can be either a brain trust or miners in the coal miners like to basically help contribute to those kinds of things. I think, sounds like potentially as guinea pigs, beta testers with the subcommittee for the educational elements for the plastic bags is one way, but other ways that we can contribute, I think a lot of us would be interested in helping.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, Nancy? You're muted.
I think there's some public comment that wants to make about this. Ty Gorman, if we want to take that now or wait till the end.
I don't see Ty's hand raised. What are you referring to?
He just raised it. Raised it.
Go ahead, Ty.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the discussion here. And I think that the Lawrence staff has done a great job on a variety of things here, and including the discussion on the details of the IRP. And I think
Sounds like we might have lost him.
We lost you, Ty.
Totally.
I think we'll come back to Ty during public comment.
Hands up again.
Next thing on our agenda is election of officers for 2024. And we need to elect a chair and a vice chair. And people that get elected for that, it's an important role that they try to be available to work on the agendas and be at the meetings and such. And so it's appreciated, whoever's willing to do that. And Ty, we'll go ahead and we'll come back to you later. So with that, you elect a chair first. And I'm just going to say I would nominate Ben Sykes to be the chair next year.
I'll second it.
So we had a nomination and a second for that. This is an action item. I think before we vote, I'll see if there are any public comments on that vote. Seeing none, I will ask all those in favor of approving Ben as chair next year, please, well, actually, starting here in a few minutes, not just next year, but starting here in a few minutes, you would be chair. Please signify by saying aye.
Should we vote on a slate? I would nominate Kay as vice chair if she's willing.
We could do that, sure.
I am willing.
So Don nominates Kay as vice chair. You're willing to do that, Kay?
Yes.
I would second that.
Beat me to it.
So also an action item. So the slate, I don't know if we have any public comment. It looks like Cameron wants to comment on the election. You're muted, Cameron. There's a hand raised, though.
Looks like they lowered their hand for now.
Okay, it's still on my screen.
Okay.
Anyway, oh, you know what? It was my mouse. When it's my mouse arrow turns into a hand when it's on the screen. Sorry about that. Okay, that explains that. So all those in favor of approving Ben as chair and Kay as vice chair, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. All right, congratulations, Ben and Kay. You have a meeting to run.
Oh, okay. I realized Stan really wants to get out of the hot seat.
No, I think we do it tonight, don't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would just first say thank you to my fellow members, and I want to thank Stan for his leadership through, I think, what was a pretty tumultuous period for the SAB from the beginning of when you took over through City Commission and the Board of Boards, the Committee of Committees, and I know that you also were dealing with plenty of your own things as well, and I just want to thank you for being such a steady hand at a time when we really needed it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I second that.
Yes.
Because I learned about it after our last meeting. For those that do know as well, Abigail Jo Jones, who was a former chair, had passed away this last year. So for those of you that knew her as Makokwa, I think is how you pronounce it, who's Prairie Band Potawatomi and led SAB as well, a couple of chairs before Stan. So I just wanted to express my condolences to her family. And for those of you out there that didn't know that already, she was an important part of SAB for a while there. So I guess now the next action item that we have, or the next item that we have up, is to receive an update on the outcome of the Boards and Commissions Structure Committee and the recommendations that were received by City Commission. So is that you, Stan, or some combination of
Sure.
you and Kathy? Thanks.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So I know that the Boards and Commissions Structure Committee, the BCSC, I'm just going to read it so that everyone hears it in context. It said, because the Sustainability Advisory Board does not regularly take up issues brought to it by the City Commission or city staff and does not typically have actionable agenda items, it does not appear to currently function like most of the other city advisory boards. As a board that tends to initiate its own agenda priorities, some of its actions may not be in alignment with the city's strategic plan and not in alignment with the recommended policies and procedures for advisory boards. Accordingly, the BCSC recommends that the Sustainability Advisory Board be dissolved. But then the letter could have ended that way, but myself and another board member suggested some additional language be added. And that reads, because environmental sustainability is an essential commitment of the city's strategic plan that is incorporated into all strategic plan outcomes, the BCSC recommends that the City Commission consider how to better align environmental sustainability with the strategic plan. Recognizing the functional importance of the Sustainability Advisory Board and how we can incorporate it into the unmistakable identity outcome, the BCSC recommends that the City Commission consider restructuring or reformatting the SAB to more closely align it with other advisory boards, City Commission needs and goals, City Manager support, and the achievement of our city's strategic plan outcomes. So this letter was presented to the City Commission what was it, back on November 21st? Was that the day, I think?
Yeah.
And my understanding is the City Commission has asked the city manager to draw up resolutions and recommendations based on this letter, but I don't think there's been any other action taken than that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in the presentation to the City Commission, as it relates to the Sustainability Advisory Board, the commissioners all kind of voiced that they were not in agreement to dissolve the Sustainability Advisory Board, but there was a lot of discussion around reimagining the Sustainability Advisory Board. So that's the part that kind of came out of for this board and the direction to staff. Currently, our city attorney's office is working on all the resolutions and the transition paperwork for all these boards and commissions, including the Sustainability Advisory Board. So that's kind of what came out of our direction from the City Commission, was to keep the Sustainability Advisory Board, but to reimagine it, so not keep it as is. Looks like Don has a question.
But yeah, I don't think we know what the future holds. So Don's hand is raised.
So, Kathy, did you say that there are city staff that are reimagining this right now? I missed what you said there. And if so, how can we be part of that conversation?
Our city attorney's office is who is directed to, they're the ones that draft the resolutions that will change all the advisory boards, all the ones that need changing, as well as into their new format, and any changes to like the membership, the number of members that are going to be allowed in all of these new boards that are being created and so forth. So this is much larger than just the Sustainability Advisory Board, as you all know. So all that documentation that they're going to put together is going to go in front of commission, probably not next month or the following month. It's going to take some time. And it is that group that is going to lead the conversations around how is the Sustainability Advisory Board going to be reimagined. So there are some folks that have contacted me directly with their thoughts. Whether you're a board member or a community member or others, you're certainly welcome to submit any comments to me or have a conversation with me. I think you all know my cell phone number. So I am kind of putting together any thoughts, feedback, et cetera, that I've been receiving to help with the process. But at this time, like I said, it's a really large undertaking that our city attorney's office is going to go through, but they're following through with what the direction was from the city commission. And at that time, when they present it to city commission, again, it's a public meeting. There's going to be opportunity for the commission to either proceed as is, vote something down, make any changes. It's an opportunity for the public to be involved and provide public comment on what's being presented to the city commission and so forth. With any of the boards and any of the parameters that are selected for, like how big these boards are going to be and so forth. And you know, is the agenda going to be drafted by city staff for these boards, or is it going to be the chair? A lot of that conversation is yet to come. Is that?
This seems like a kind of a weird process that the Sustainability Advisory Board would have not, there's not really a formal way to discuss this. I mean, it seems like we would be best suited to give some collective advice on how to reimagine ourselves. I've been participating in these board meetings for years now, and I've watched it wax and wane, which any board or commission is that it's going to do. I've watched it through some pretty dysfunctional times, and not too distant past, and I've watched it, work hard to develop agendas, and then the agendas get forgot when people drop off and new people come in. But I don't feel that this board I feel like this board has done actionable items in the past and is capable of doing actionable items in the future. As Ben mentioned, that we would be happy to help with this process of submitting proposals for much needed funding to reach some of our goals. And I do hope and wish that the city staff, and Kathy in particular, would let this board know how we can best serve the city. But I don't know, it seems worthy of a little bit of discussion since we have a light agenda. I know we want to get updates from the subcommittees, and but maybe with any remaining time we have, we could kind of do a little brainstorming about things that maybe we can agree on to to provide to city staff. I don't know. It just feels like the board's left out of the conversation of how the board should be restructured.
Kay.
Hi, Kay Johnson, Sustainability Advisory Board member, which I think we were supposed to be saying all along, but I agree with Dawn. It does seem like a little strange that we're kind of set aside and have our future being discussed without our input. I would like to go ahead and say that I feel like I did hear quite a bit of discussion on, which was right before the discussion on the boards and committees on the asset management team, and there were quite a number of capital projects that were discussed that quite often the Sustainability Advisory Board is not ever included in until we find out long, well after some decisions are made, including about the fuel source of a building or other sustainability aspects of a project. It seems like that we should definitely be somehow included on the, and considered as the assets of the city are reviewed. And there's a really good presentation that was right before the discussion on the boards and committees that included some grading of those assets. And interestingly enough, there were a couple of things that were identified, but more in the future than I would have liked to have seen on sustainability issues. And so that's another reason why I feel like if we're going to be actively involved in sustainability issues with the city of Lawrence, we should at least be somehow included on that asset management and evaluation. They actually had a readiness assessment that was done, and then they had the infrastructure was graded, which interestingly enough, there were several C's and D's, B, C's and D's that were discussed on infrastructure. So I don't know, that included facilities, airport fleet, parking and transit, parks and rec, solid waste, streets and transportation, stormwater, wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, water distribution, water treatment, all of which sustainability issues are involved. So somehow I think we should be involved in some of the discussion on how to improve the C's to B's and A's, or at least provide input on the fuels that they're going to be using, or other sustainability issues. To me, that would really be a big help, I think. And so we wouldn't have the discussion like we did with the transit building that still has yet, it's got natural gas instead of electric.
Anybody else? I mean, one of the things I hear Kay saying, Kathy, perhaps is how best we can contribute, and Dawn too. So is it worth a question to city legal to ask how, do we wait until city commission is actually discussing these things? Or is there a way in which we can contribute comments now? And you said through you, but that may be inviting more comment than you want personally right now if members of the public as well have visions for how they want to see SAB. So do you want to take that all on yourself, or if city legal is charged with that at the end of the day, is that worth a question of them, of asking how best members of the public and the boards can contribute to changes that they might be writing? I know it's very early days.
Yeah, again, they are working through the process of what's going to take them multiple months. Right now, there's no detail exactly how this is going to go down,
Okay.
and who's going to be involved in the conversations, or how input's going to be taken. So for now, all I can say is submit your feedback to me. Be ready to submit feedback if there's an opportunity as well in the next 6 months. But I didn't want to not give somebody an option. Submitting your feedback to the city attorney's office right now is not going to be helpful. That's not the process that has been set forth. again, we're just taking the direction that the city commission has just recently given us, and we're working out how are we going to get there, right? How are we going to get to the finish line with all these changes, for sure. And I do appreciate Kay's comment. I did want to speak to that a little bit. She was, part of a presentation from the Connected City Outcome team. And I just want to, again, voice this because it's been coming up in part of the conversation of the Committee on Committees and other staff too, is that there's a lot of conversations that happen in unmistakable identity, that's your Parks and Rec department, in strong welcoming neighborhoods, that's your planning department, Connected City, which is MSO, Transit, MPO. There's a lot of conversations and projects and programs that are happening, and they really need somebody with sustainability at the table. So at one point it was thought of, like one option was that there would be somebody like a sustainability seat that is involved in all of these conversations that are happening on asset management or infrastructure projects, et cetera. The transit, the downtown hub that they're having a conversation right now in PTAC, and so forth. So all these groups are combining into these outcome groups and having these conversations, which there is, I agree with Kay, a sustainability component to all this work that the city is putting out, because this is a commitment that crosses over all the work that the city's doing, environmental sustainability. So I just wanted to add that, but I'm so glad, Kay, that you saw the work session presentation. I thought that was an awesome presentation and update from our MSO team. And if you haven't tuned in the past, there are lots of similar type of presentations from our outcome teams at city commission meetings through work sessions, which, by the way, you are, they do open up the work sessions to public comments. So if anybody wants to ask a question or say something, more than welcome.
I would encourage everyone to go back and watch that because it was a really good discussion about individual areas, and they've done a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right.
What was the date of that meeting?
It was whatever the meeting was.
21st.
Was it the 21st?
The
November?
Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
And it was right before the board's
Boards and commission structures.
structure.
It was a great presentation.
Anybody else, any thoughts on that? Yeah, Nancy.
So I think what I'm hearing from everybody is that the SAB would like to have the ability to have input to the process. And so, Kathy, I wonder if you could communicate that piece in particular, that we as a group, as a board, would like to have input into the reimagination of the functioning of the group.
I can absolutely submit that formally. I already told them that the SAB is going to want to submit.
You know
Just,
us too
but I'll do
well.
it formally, that you all said so.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Well, let's move on to a round of updates from our subcommittees that are within or that have SAB representation. So Nancy, would you be able to lead us off for the Climate Action Plan, please?
Yeah, the final open house for the Climate Action Plan was yesterday, and public input is being accepted through December 17th. The subcommittee didn't have any additional input as a group since the previous meeting. The only other thing to bring up with the subcommittee is the resolution that we already discussed regarding the KCC and Evergy intervener.
Thank you, Nancy. I assume that also covers the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee update that you might have?
Yeah.
Is that fair? Yeah. I was able to meet last week just as a kind of private citizen with Jamie Hoffling to talk about the Climate Action Plan since we weren't able to. And I did talk with her about potentially in the new year, her and Kim Kreiner-Ritchie being able to come back, or at least us being able to more formally as a board give input that will be at a later stage, of course, on the Climate Action Plan. I'm glad that we have Nancy's representation on there, so SAB gets a voice to some degree. I think there are a lot of things that are coming up personally between the city and the county that are important aspects of both plans, both the open spaces plan and the climate action plan. And that's a good segue for me to give the update from the Food Policy Council, where much of the discussion has been about whether or not building the Kansas Sky Energy Center in North Lawrence, which would be about 1,100 acres of solar panels, on top of some prime agricultural farmland, is supported or not, and how that will play out, not just for that plan, but other solar and renewable energy projects that would go in the county. And so, as you can imagine, on a diverse panel that includes many farmers and other people, there's a lot of discussion about how that plays out. And there's very different, perhaps, urban and rural opinions, and also, where do we get our electrons from discussion, and where do you actually put these things is an important aspect of it, just like we heard from Evergy, I think it was 3 weeks ago now here. And Savion gave a presentation as well to the Food Policy Council. So that's really my update from there. Those are the things right now that are at the very top of the list.
So did the Food Policy Committee make a recommendation one way or the other?
The Food Policy Council did not make a recommendation. The Food Policy Council essentially assessed what were, how aspects of the regulations were being applied in this case, and what was the consequences potentially of those. But we were asked not to make a recommendation up or down. And besides that, I think it was meant to be more general, like it was meant to be, it came before us because of Kansas Sky Energy, but it's also the first time that these regulations, particularly the agrivoltaics, have been used at this scale. And so that was part of what we wanted to look at. So for everybody on the board's understanding, one of the things that came up was maybe the inadvertent inclusion in the regulations of a 5% grading limitation across a large area like that necessarily probably means that most of these projects would have to go into essentially bottomland, so stuff by the river, and that's where all of the good agricultural land is. And so whether or not you agree with it should go there or not is a different question, but that was one of the things that we kind of talked about, particularly for people that don't want to see that land be removed from agricultural practice. So it's kind of, again, it's the first time these regulations that are relatively new for the county are getting played out. And as you all know, energy is different. There are different kinds of energy in the same way that agriculture is different, right? Like there are different kinds of agriculture that we do, whether it's grazing, whether or not you're doing, food that's going to be sold at the farmer's market, or you're doing large scale corn and soybean rotations. So those weren't really addressed a lot in our stuff, but those are things that came up. I think that's pretty much mine. Kay, did you have something from the Land Development Code?
Yes, so I did submit, I missed this last week's meeting because I was out of town at a conference and out of state, but I did submit the comments to the Land Development Code Update Committee regarding those issues about natural landscaping. And because Ben had submitted some to me as well as another member of the public, I sent those directly to the chair of the committee as well as the consultant, and thinking that that's what they were going to talk about at the meeting because they did not send the agenda out in advance. Interestingly, they talked about energy instead, and I rewatched the meeting today, and the discussion of utility scale solar did come up again, and with the in the context of what should the codes look like as far as developing energy options for the city urban area, where a lot of the county people feel like that maybe they're being asked to shoulder more of the burden in this respect. So discussions were what kind of incentives could be done to get renewable energy in the city, as well as the option of, utility scale solar in the county. And the Planning Commission chair is on the Land Development Committee. So there was really good discussion about that. Also, one of our senators, who's very actively involved in energy discussions, is on the committee, Senator Marcy Francisco, and so she was able to provide information about what can be done with the limitations that we've got with the Corporation Commission. So it was interesting. There was not any specifics discussed, but obviously some discussion on how can we increase the city's capability of doing renewable energy so that it won't feel so bad to the county folks. It's kind of the way I summed it up. But I can tell you personally, from being involved in and actually working for an energy company in my previous life, if we don't have a variety of energy sources, we're not going to have energy. So if we ever hope to be able to close the coal plant, we need to do some larger scale energy options. And for the benefit of our community and our county and our state, we need to not have the NIMBY syndrome going on. We need to be able to figure out how to do this. So that was the discussion in the Land Development Code Update Committee, as well as some other areas. But there is a survey out. I think I had Kathy forward that to you. Please take the survey because it's real interesting. They've got pictures, and you can kind of vote on little pictures of what kind of things, like what kind of buildings you would like to see in our community. It's not long. It's an easy survey. But also, there are more ways that we can contribute to the comments, both for energy resources as well as sustainability issues. We did not talk about, they did not talk about natural landscaping. And I feel like that if I'll try to go back and actually input those comments into the sections, I think we have a better chance of them being there if I put them in.
Okay.
So anyway, sorry, long story, but.
Is there, so this has been Sykes, SAB Chair. So is there a way that, for example, for members of the public that watch this later, or even members here, if they can't find the email, is there a place that they can go?
Yes,
easily to get to the Land Development Code?
Right, that, it has its own website, and Kathy can provide it if somebody, she may even be able to look it up really quick, but I just keep on inputting City of Lawrence Land Development Code Update and
In Google.
yes, in Google,
Okay.
and it shows up.
Okay.
But so it does have its own website, but don't be in the city's planning commission website. Go to the
Development Code.
development code update. And I did have some cards. Next meeting, I'll pass out cards that have actually the
code on it.
website on
Great.
it.
Thank you. Anyone, any questions or thoughts about the subcommittee stuff? We'll start having one, I think, next year on 9744, since we've made that a new subcommittee.
But
We can't get that, I was hoping that we could get that at least started so that whoever is going to chair that can get a meeting going. I know we've got the holidays coming up and everything, but rather than waiting until the next SAB meeting to put the structure in place for that 9477 subcommittee to start meeting, it just seems like it would be good to just get it going.
I think we only had 2 people express interest, so how many people can we have who was
Yeah, we have
besides me?
You as chair,
Right.
Dawn, and then Amanda. We're
Was
supposed to
it-
be it.
Was there anybody else? Mosen?
And it's also
Great. So,
great. And that's my understanding that members of the public that are not members of the Sustainability Advisory Board may join those subcommittee meetings so that there may be more input out there, which leads me to a second question. Hopefully maybe Kathy can answer this. Would it be possible to get the subcommittee dates on the calendar, or is that too much on the city's calendar
The city,
or on our board website?
the city's calendar is for all public meetings. Currently, your subcommittee meetings are not public meetings. Is there a reason other than you knowing when the next subcommittee meeting is? Because if we publish it on the website, people are going to want to attend. And these are not quorum type meetings. They're smaller group meetings.
And I just will add that with Nancy being the chair, the one that I've attended the most, we kind of just poll everybody and say, hey, can everybody meet on this? We kind of have a day that we've been meeting, and then we make sure that most everybody can meet. Occasionally, we cancel them because there's conflicts, but.
Just that component of allowing other members of the public to be engaged, I think that it can be very useful. And before I was a board member, I wasn't, I was kind of at the mercy of, or I'd have to reach out and email that person to get on the list to know when the meetings are. So I don't know, it may be too complicated, but it's something that I've wished for a long time, because I think those subcommittee meetings are where, actual nitty-gritty work and conversations happen.
But they're not supposed to be open to the public. If you want to volunteer to be on the committee, then you can, regardless of whether you're a member of the SAB, but they're not open to the public in general.
So would a statement then be for any members of the public now, or that you know of, that members of SAB know of, that might be interested in contributing to the subcommittee on 9744 should reach out to you?
Kathy.
Should reach out to Kathy, who can put them in touch.
Right. And then we can work out.
We can work out how that will work.
Right. And I don't see a meeting happening until at least probably the second week of January due to my own schedule.
Okay. But that will be arranged, that scheduling will be arranged within the subcommittee group,
Right.
not as part of SAB.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to get, if you're able to get a meeting before the
I'll try,
January SAB,
yes.
great. If not, we'll have one after that.
Right. And of course, it's important to know, is it going to be in the evening or during the day? And, those are kind of issues that usually you come up with when you get a group together. Once you get everybody's email address, and
Totally.
then we can email.
So Mohsen, it sounded like you were willing also to sit on that 9744 subcommittee?
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome, thank you very much. So that'd be 4, so that's probably the max, right, we need on any one subcommittee. Sorry, the max SAB members.
There could be 5.
Okay. Great, any other thoughts on that? So, yeah, for those of y'all that don't know, 9744 is the ordinance the city passed that are our goals for reaching renewable energy targets. So basically how the city and then members of the public will phase out global climate emissions, CO2 emissions. We speak a lot of jargon here. Okay, so the last item on our agenda before public comment was to discuss future SAB agendas, how we'll develop those, and the meeting structure. We have a short meeting today, which has turned out not to be too short, but we usually are pinned in here by the meeting that occurs at 7:15, which is the
Multicultural Arts Commission.
Multicultural Arts Commission meeting. And so we often have a lot of things that we want to discuss, or at least we discuss them for long periods of time. So I would like to have at least a short discussion from the meeting structure side about whether or not people like this time and want to make it happen at this time, like the length of the meeting that it is because it forces us to use our time more effectively, or whether or not people feel like we need longer meetings, which means we would have to move them from the day that we are on. That's basically where I'd like to start.
This schedule works for me. Wednesday, whatever. We've had this date day for
For a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah. What do others think?
I've expressed,
Go ahead, you can go, Dawn, and then Stan.
I keep forgetting to say, this is Dawn Hawkins, SAP member. I've been saying this for a long time, even before I was a board member, that it would be really great to not have these during the county commission meeting times, but I know it's really challenging to find those times. I do sometimes wish there were more time in these meetings to actually kind of get more in the weeds on some things and be more actionable.
Stan.
I think one thing that could be considered is, proposing in the agenda some timeframes so that the agenda is laid out by time. So agenda item 1 is allocated, from 5:30 to 5:35, and then item 2 is 5:35 to 5:45, or however, as an example. But I think if you put timeframes on there, it might signal your expectation to the board members as to how long you think we should spend on this particular item. And then it would also, I think, also empower the chair and the vice chair to maybe say, hey, we've allocated 10 minutes for this time. We're up on our 10 minutes. We're going to have to move on, and give you a little more control over the meeting. So it might be something you want to consider that way, of building time limits into the agenda.
I like that idea. I also like the idea of anybody that we have that are coming to speak to us definitely be given a time frame. And in other groups that I've seen, anybody that comes before certain boards that I know of, they ask them specific questions to answer so that their presentation to a board is very tailored to the needs of the group. So what we've done I've done on other places, specifically give them questions, the speakers questions to answer, whether they answer them by reading the question and answer it or by putting it into a presentation, doesn't matter to me, just so long as there's tailored information rather than just random information that sometimes comes about by having no time limit or no specific.
It sounded like you were a fan of time limits overall too, but
Yes.
especially in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially for speakers that are here.
Nancy.
So I would like to have the ability of members of the group to put out items on the agenda rather than it just be the chair and the vice chair that do it. So if we make recommendations for items, that they be considered. And with the time, I think the time's a great idea.
Thank you for that. I think we've tried to do that a little bit more towards the end here. Dawn, before I call you Kathy or Stan, my memory too is that in some of the reimaginings or some of what the boards and commissions structure committee talked about, at least some of it was talking about how the agendas would be set. Am I remembering that correctly? So that might change how it's set in totality.
Right, we may not be creating our own agenda as the transition occurs.
Okay.
It may be something that the city wants a city staff person
To set the agenda. Okay.
to actually set the agenda.
So Nancy, I'm in favor of that as well. I hope Kay would be, and others would be in favor of that. I think we'll have to set some sort of a cutoff date by which people are, like we've tried to do, submit your items if you have them. And in terms of Dawn, let me go ahead and call on you since you've had your hand up.
This is Dawn Hawkins, SAB member. Let's see, what was I going to say? I do think, I don't know, it seems like an agenda should be ongoing. You have things that stay on the agenda until they're addressed and taken off, and that things get tabled and things get added. But I think we definitely need to have input on what is on the agenda, and just to request that if a group, a company, an individual is wanting to come to us with a presentation, that the board get a chance to decide, I mean, I've seen that work this way with SAB in the past. If, Evergy wants to come and present to us, that they would have to request that, and we would decide at a meeting, and they could go at the next meeting. Unless there was something urgent, then, the chair and working with Kathy could, make an executive decision and let the board know through email that this next meeting is going, we have this presentation. I don't know if I'm coming off very articulately, but those are the two comments that I wanted to make.
Thanks. It's my understanding that's still the case. We set our own agendas about who comes and presents to us and aspects of that, at least for the current time being. Sounds like there's strong support for timed bits and having more input on the agendas. As long as that's done ahead of time, I would say that one way we can use, if we do keep this time slot, which it also sounds like there's support for, doing so means we're going to have to be more efficient. So I would argue that getting our agenda set and getting the items that are necessary for people to do their homework before they come here is an important aspect of us being more efficient with our time. It shouldn't, and I'm just as guilty of this as everybody else, but like it shouldn't be the first time you read over it when you look at the agenda as you sit down for this thing. I mean, Kathy goes through a lot of work to make sure that these things are up ahead of time so the public can see them. We are members of the public and need to be doing our due diligence and reading beforehand. Yes, Stan.
So as for Nancy's comment about enabling members to have input into the agenda, we've always had that, but I think it is important to remember that everybody can't be emailing you for open meetings purposes. We need to go through Kathy. So it might be just something where we set a date, agenda input by this date, because we have guidelines or our bylaws say that we have to publish an agenda by a certain date.
Yep.
So maybe that's something we need to do is calendar internally, hey, if you want input on the agenda, it's got to be done by this date. And then the chair and the vice chair will work with Kathy to finalize the agenda during the next week.
Okay.
And
That's a
something
great
like
idea.
that. But I think we can't lose sight of that as well.
Okay. Don, was that your hand up from before? Are you-
Nancy?
I know I have a couple more comments.
Okay.
So one thing that I think could make our meetings more efficient, and this is kind of a request of Kathy, that maybe it will be easy, but since you are already preparing for these meetings every month, would it be possible to get like an outline of the things that are on your staff report to come out with the agenda packet? And that would also serve the wonderful purpose of having that information. Like, we get so much information from you, Kathy, in these meetings, but if it's not in the minutes, for that meeting to reference later, or in some kind of a meeting attachment, then it's hard for us or for members of the public to go and look and see, okay, what was she talking about? Oh, and follow up and get more information. So I feel like if it was possible to get an outline of your staff report a few days before the meeting, then it could become an attachment to the agenda, and we would all have a chance to sort of review that and maybe even be more prepared with questions. You wouldn't have to, drill down in detail if we already have it presented to us. Just a thought. And a request, I guess.
Nancy.
So I would suggest that another way we can be efficient at our SAB meetings is to really use the subcommittees to do the deep dive, and then have a lot of the discussion there, and then bring it to the SAB once things are worked out amongst the smaller groups. So just a bit of way we could be more efficient.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, then we had previously had the ability to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during our meeting. That's what the city commission does, and we actually had it listed for a time and on our agenda as that option. So I would like to see us add that back in, so that if something has come up, then during the last 2 weeks, whatever, then we can
edit it.
respond to it more timely.
How do others feel about that? Does anybody know the history of why that might have been on there or not?
Because we were doing that before.
I recall the thing that was on the agenda was to approve the agenda as is.
If you go back about 6 months, you'll find it.
I understand, but it was.
Just to approve the agenda, it actually had a statement that said to consider the agenda. Are there additional items to be added? Kathy, you can probably go back and look and find out.
Yeah, there was an item to approve the agenda, as you're mentioning, and that got added mid last year on request of this board. So it had been running through the agenda, that agenda item for some time. And a few meetings ago, Stan addressed that, the chair addressed it with this board was it okay to remove at this time? I think it was a very particular reason why that got added last year, when there was a little bit of concerns of what was getting added to the agenda and where time was being spent during discussion at board meetings. Some of you may recall some of those previous issues, but a few meetings ago, it was addressed to be taken out, and Stan could speak more on that. I know he had reached out to a few of you before the meeting to make sure you were okay with that. But if the board would like to bring it back, then absolutely, if the majority wants it back, we can add that. That's pretty simple on my side of things, to bring it back.
It sounds like maybe we've got JT who's going to give some public comment in just a second. It sounds like maybe I can draft something that I can send to you about all of these pieces put together and what a meeting structure would look like and a timeline for agenda submission. Could I do that to send to you? Give you one less thing to do?
That's good.
Does that sound okay? And then at our next meeting, we can amend that and approve that as kind of the meeting structure. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. JT, thanks.
And you got to go back to Ty.
JT, you can lead off our public comment period.
Okay, your agendas are utterly unique in that public comment is at the very end. The first time I came to speak with you, I wanted to speak during general public comment, but because I raised my hand and spoke to an issue that was on your agenda and time was tight at the end of the meeting, the chairperson said, JT's already been heard from, and that was it. So if you were to move public, and I hope that never happens to anyone else again, if you were to move public comment forward in your agenda, if no one comments, then you're done with that item. I would suggest you leave it behind minutes so that if someone speaks to you and the minutes are incorrect, they have an opportunity to say, that's not what I said in your minutes. But you're utterly unique in having public comment at the very end, and it leaves the option of just cutting someone out who came to speak to you. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts about moving public comment up?
I agree, and if we could have it be at the stated for public comment, and then parenthetically for items not already on the agenda,
Okay.
and state that it's 3 minutes or whatever.
We have that in there. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't the city commission take general public comment at the end of their meetings?
They do at the
Or at the beginning.
That's at the beginning of the meetings, just general public comment?
Currently, it's at the beginning. It
Okay.
used to be at the end, and there's still discussions as to where's the right place. So
Yeah.
There's still active conversations about it.
Because we tend to take public comment on action items that we're voting on, that we're actually taking action on, and then we have a separate time for public comment as well.
I personally don't have a problem whether it's at the beginning or at the end, but I do feel like there should be a set time allowed for it. So
Overall, not
yeah,
just per person.
Right, because we can do what's happening sometime at the city commission meeting where they are only taking public comment and hardly get it. And then they're working until midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
We don't have that luxury of time.
Great. I think I'll try and put that in there, of an element of that. I appreciate the comment, JT. Ty, do we have you back?
You do. Thanks so much. And I apologize for my computer crashing earlier. And so just want to give a quick plug here for the, I think a resolution does have some benefits. And so first I'll address the IRP intervention process, and there are other interventions that I think are necessary for Lawrence to be a part of to meet the clean energy goals and to address the innovative clean energy projects that the county and city are working on together with the Inflation Reduction Act money. And being in those discussions with Evergy and the IRP and maybe a couple other related dockets is kind of the only way, I think, to have a seat at the table and navigate how that process plays out as far as GHG reductions and clean energy participation on the Evergy grid in their planning processes and how they count it towards resource adequacy and things like that. So really appreciate the city moving forward with that. I think it's not prohibitively expensive, and the way that we can work together as far as legal and coalitions around expert witnesses can take some of the burden off of that. So part of what Sierra Club wants to do is to make it a more democratic, less exclusive process to have a say in the utility planning process. I should mention, by the way, that I'm the Sierra Club Kansas and Oklahoma field organizer, senior field organizer. So that's something, big part of my job is dealing with those dockets. And the resolution aspect really worked well for Kansas City, Missouri, just as far as saying we don't want coal burnt in our area. And Lawrence coal plant there in Douglas County was supposed to stop burning coal this year, and then they just arbitrarily said 2028. That doesn't affect their capacity to stop burning coal in Lawrence. It doesn't derate them. It's not something that's difficult for them to do. It just is a decision they're making based on not wanting to securitize their coal equipment yet. And for when Kansas City, Missouri passed a resolution asking them to close Hawthorne, they really had to and did, for political and media reasons, engage with the city directly and with the people that were working on the climate action plan in Kansas City, Missouri directly. And they still are in frequent contact, Evergy and the city, around the issues that are important to Kansas City residents and clean energy goals. I think that the resolution had that effect more than the intervention did, I think, in the Missouri area. So I did want to put a plug on working towards a resolution from the SAB to be that the city and or county, maybe both, can demand that coal not be burned in Douglas County, and any other goals that might make sense for the Sustainability Board to pass on at this time, especially around the low-income work Inflation Reduction Act possibilities and how Evergy can combine their efficiency program and the resources with clean energy resources with the projects that Lawrence is working on.
Great.
Community solar, for example. Yeah. So thank you very much, and appreciate your time.
I do want to add a comment.
Go ahead.
Kathy Richardson, Director of Sustainability. I just want to mention, I did contact staff within KCMO. They have confirmed with me that they did not pass the resolution. So I just want to clarify that there was no resolution from Kansas City, Missouri, but they did include a section there about the closure of the Hawthorne coal-fired power plant in their climate action planning document. So just want to clarify because I've reached out to Kansas City, Missouri for a copy of the resolution, and they did let me know that that was not something they did.
I apologize. We talked about my using the word resolution when it was the passage of the climate action plan, which was passed by the city and the city commission, but it was not technically. I shouldn't have been using the term resolution for that because that's a different political term of art. So apologize for that.
Thanks for the clarification. Dawn.
I would like to add this to our agenda for next month. And I was wondering if Ty could send us a copy of what is already drafted, or maybe Kathy can send us the one that Kansas City had drafted that apparently didn't pass. I think it's worth us discussing next month.
So just in light of what we discussed before, I guess I would ask if that sounds like something that can be done within a subcommittee, that work would be done within a subcommittee like the Climate Action Plan, because that's where it was for Douglas County Mo, right? For Douglas County, for KC Mo, it was within their Climate Action Plan. Kathy, is what you said?
It was a discussion within all the stakeholders, similar to the process right now of the drafting of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan for Douglas County that has a steering committee and staff members, and it's opened up these open houses for public comment. So this type of discussion was part of that climate action planning process, and eventually it did make it into the plan. So if that's something that the subcommittee for the Climate Action Plan would like to submit to Douglas County, we have the contacts for feedback for the Douglas County Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. The draft is currently out. As you all know, it is not a final draft. So that is a process that the subcommittee could submit some of that feedback, like they've been providing feedback for the last few months on that Climate Action and Adaptation Plan.
But Kathy, couldn't we, as a subcommittee, also work on a resolution for the city independent of what we do for the Douglas County Climate Action Plan?
Usually, advisory board members don't write legal documents like a resolution or ordinance. I know that's been an exception in this board that has had subcommittees that have drafted like the single-use plastic bag ordinance that then was rewritten by our legal staff once the commission directed staff to work on it. Earlier this meeting, I mentioned that staff is working on this. So if the purpose of passing a resolution is for the commission, and this is what Ty's explained to me in the past, is for the commission to make the statement and direct the city manager to work on this. It's currently a work in process. So we're telling you our staff is working on this currently. So I guess I don't understand what the advantage is of the resolution, but you can choose to have a discussion of that in your subcommittee if you think that, I don't know if it's you don't trust that staff is working on this or where this is going, but certainly it is something that we're currently working on. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
a comment. Kathy, I don't think it has anything to do about trust, really. It's just that we've made comments to Douglas County for the Climate Action Plan, and some of these things haven't gotten in there. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the current plan doesn't say close the coal plant. And it also doesn't say support developing renewable energy. So I think the issue is that I would like to see it in multiple areas, like Nancy's suggesting, that We encourage the commissioners to provide a resolution. We encourage Douglas County to support renewable energy and to close the coal plant. Ask Evergy to close the coal plant. So far, it hadn't made it into the climate action plan, which is bizarre to me because this is about greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't have anything to do with not trusting staff. It has to do with trying to emphasize the importance of having this go forward and having it go forward with the city because the county's not doing it.
And we have someone coming from the public and requesting it, so I feel like it's worthy of at least discussing it, of giving a little bit of time at the next meeting. Okay. I think that it's perfectly appropriate for this board to review already drafted resolutions and decide whether or not that it should be recommended to the city commission and in support of that. Either we could put it forward or we can send a letter in support of someone else submitting it for discussion at the city commission. And I think that, we can't wait around for the climate action plan to get done to make these statements.
Got it. Anybody else? Any other? I don't think I saw any other public commenters. Yes, Dan.
Looking ahead at future meetings, we have our meeting in February, I think is February 14. I don't know if that's a potential conflict for people, but just throw that out there.
Are you asking me to be around?
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
Should we go out for Valentine's dinner?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
It's a good point.
I noticed that when I was looking at my calendar, my availability, that I don't know if it's a problem, but just be aware.
Okay, we will take that into account. Thank you.
And we can change our meeting dates as long as we give sufficient notice to the public and have the agenda reflect that. So.
Cameron, Nancy, do you have one more thing?
I was just going to say, can we suggest right now just to make it a week sooner or a week later in February?
I'm not currently prepared to do that, partially because I'm supposed to go on a trip with my wife for our 20th anniversary, and we haven't set the dates yet. So I apologize that I don't know if it's going to be a week sooner or a week later. It is in February.
I'm going to be in Yellowstone a week sooner.
A week sooner stands out. He's going to be in Yellowstone. I know we're not going to Yellowstone for our anniversary, so we will not see you here. But
I'm actually I likely will be unavailable on the 14th, but not because of any dinner dates. I'll be traveling for work.
Okay, so it sounds like we got some conflicts on the 14th. We'll try and work on that date.
And the week before.
And the week before.
I don't have any conflicts on the 14th, but I thought I would bring it up.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to draft something. Is Cameron still on here? Cameron left. So we'll have to think about, hopefully that wasn't a product of our shenanigans. I think does anybody have anything else before we adjourn for the evening? Thank you to our.
I'd just like to make one thing. I mentioned that there, if y'all aren't already aware, there's a development project called the New Boston Crossing that's being proposed right by the wetlands. And I was trying to find the next Planning Commission date for that discussion, and I can't find it, but just something that for people to pay attention to. I think that we should definitely not be building a gigantic new development right on top of the wetland, which is going to require bringing in a bunch of dirt to change the level of the land, which is going to change the drainage, and it's just a really bad idea. So just keep your eyes and ears open on that one and try to attend Planning Commission meetings as you're able.
Sounds great. I think Kay's done really well too for you, Don, and for everybody that sees those kind of things. Passing those on to Kathy so they can be distributed to all the members is a really great idea.
There is a Douglas County, it's Lawrence Douglas County Planning Commission on the 18th, I believe, is the solar.
Sky Energy.
Sky Energy.
Kansas Sky Energy Planning Commission meeting is on the 18th. Yep. Thanks very much. Thank you all, and we'll see you in January. Bye. Kathy, is that okay?